of O-Ship. This week, I have another one of my very interesting friends on. I would argue that Peter Hirshberg, who you're going to meet today, might be one of my most interesting friends, and that's a pretty big, tough talk. But I've known Peter way back from when he was the chairman of a company called Technorati that I always admired and thought was really cool. And he and I met, I guess, in the mid 2000s, and he really exposed me to some of my kind of first impressions around digital art. Now, if you look Peter up online, you're going to find out that he's the CEO of Lighthouse One. He is the chairman of something called the Maker City Project. He's also a venture partner for the Catalyst Opportunity Zone Impact Fund. And a lot of those things are about transforming cities, which is a whole other show in itself. Very, very interesting, kind of exciting territory of really impacting change in this world. But today we're going to talk about the other side of Peter's world, which is he's just someone who is deeply, deeply passionate about digital art, both in terms of how he applies this in a kind of more organized and professional way as the chairman of the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, to which, on a side note, if you don't know them, do literally city scale level multimedia projects, to even his own personal art collection, which when I went, to his house for the first time, over a decade ago, it was the first time I'd ever really seen anyone with a very extensive digital art collection, where in some cases just, videos looping in frames on a wall, and that some expression of kind of digital or video art to, projection or interactive type work. Just really, really interesting stuff. And he has got a perspective, in my opinion, of seeing the early parts of digital art as it's how it kind of emerged. And I think a lot of people just not always getting it, to, frankly, seeing where we're at today. We're seeing things like NFTs achieving borderline hysteria level, conversations online about it. And if there's anyone we wanted to pick their brain on this, it's going to have to be Peter. So with that, welcome to another week of O-Ship. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hello and good morning. Good to be here. So this is a fun lens in which to look at technological change in general, coming at from this art perspective.
Yeah. On a side note, I didn't, not to put all the pressure on you, did you know that I considered you one of my most interesting friends?
I am deeply honored, and clearly this is a reason that we all have to get together again as the pandemic comes down and resume whatever hijinks were going on in the 1990s or whatever, right?
Yeah, seriously due for another in-person event. We're getting there. I got my second vaccination shot, so I'm ready. Ready to mingle.
More time meeting more interesting people on podcasts that I put together, like this one you've done, and I have one called Quarantine. We're up to 60 episodes, so I feel like I'm connected to all these people globally. We have very interesting conversations, and all my regular friends that I hang around and cook with, like they're the ones I'm worried that I haven't been given the love to. You can click on a video and find your friend.
Yeah, I need to check out Quarantine. I'm totally off subject, but I'm intrigued. Did you have any issues, with Facebook giving you hell about the name? Our friend Joseph Jaffe, who was on the show the other day, he had to show that I'm not even going to say the name of the show because the algorithms from Facebook was literally stopping him from promoting the show because it had a, COVID related name in it, and it was like triggering all their algorithms. Do you have any problems with Quarantine,
yes.
or were you on the safe there?
At various times, deep algorithms in Twitter would stop copying it or taking it off. Yes, and then you had to appeal and say, "What's going on here?"
Yeah. You're like, I just mentioned it one time. I'm not trying to tell people to inject themselves with bleach or anything. Don't worry. So, yeah, crazy. Anyway, I digress. So, Peter, look, I know a lot about you, but it would be great if you could tell our audience a little bit about your background. Whether it's even professional or even onto the art side of the world.
I have spent kind of a career in tech trying to introduce things which at the time a lot of people had no idea if they needed or they wanted. But there's always there's that instinct that there's something there, and it's almost like a trick to pull it off and convince people they want it. And when I was just out of business school, I went to Apple, so I worked for Steve Jobs. And I remember when I showed up, um, uh, there was a New York Times article asking whether or not there were uses for home computers. Um, they said, well, people use them for gaming, and people think they want to use them for their recipe or accounting, but no one ever wrote software for that. So this just may be a fad. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh no, oh shit, maybe I made a bad decision here, right? And then we had to figure out how to get people to want these things. And then once we got people using them for games, it's like, why would you ever want to communicate on a computer? So kind of each of these was figuring stuff out from scratch. Often when people were adverse to them, like even Apple early on, even though today we think all we do is networking, communications, the internet, early on our salespeople were like, why do we have to hook to another computer? It's complex. And even Steve Jobs said, never trust a computer you can't pick up, because the guys with connected computers are the IT guys, and they're our enemies because they'll get IBM. So whether it was at Apple or later doing an early social media company, you always have to explain this to people like why this is not a ridiculous idea. And that takes us into this world of digital art, because most people figure, well, Monet's just fine, and it's really exciting to go see Picasso, but a moving screen of stuff like that couldn't be art because it's a bunch of technology. And why would a robot be art anyway? So throughout history, people have these, but the other thing that happens is that in any given generation, people grow up of artistic mentality, and they use the tools that are available. And in one era it was pastels and oils, and in another era, in the Renaissance, perspective got invented. And today you have robots, you have screens, you can create art even in life forms using synthetic biology, and all of these can be commentaries on what's going on in our world. So one reason art and technology is important is we are going through an era now where there are all of these changes, and as a society we're just beginning to figure out, what do we think about privacy? What do we think about artificial life? What's the role of robots, of transhuman things? Do they help us or do they hurt us? These are pretty big questions, and sometimes you see them played out like in politics, like in the vax or not vax thing. It's red or it's blue. Sometime when privacy happens, Facebook calls in and people gets called to court, and we all begin to realize how things are captured on us. Well, artists who play with technology and data and surveillance, in a way, they help us have our dreams and understand this stuff. And also, they can start messing with technologies and show us weaknesses. So this artistic process is where innovation happens. So cooking, and also Silicon Valley gets a lot of grief for, well, you don't have values. You're not actually thinking through the implications. Well, you add artists to a team and you'll resolve that and play with it. So that's the reason we have an organization that does this.
Yeah, I can't help but imagine if one of art's purposes, whether it's to inspire or to create emotional reactions from people or provoke thought, then if in a world where all of us are just so immersed in every aspect of technology, does art that is enabled through technology kind of have a better chance of maybe resonating with people today than it ever has before? With some of these really complex subjects, like you talked about a moment ago, maybe it's easier to generate those reactions or generate those that thought provoking or that moment or the emotional reaction when you're I guess that close to your subject matter, if that makes sense.
Well, first of all, art can work on all of our senses, and we'll show you some examples in a moment, right? It works on you emotionally. It's field and ground. It takes you away from the ordinary, so you can see things a little bit differently. At Autodesk, which makes a whole bunch of tools for both 3D printing and extractive stuff and working with leather and milling and such, they bring artists and residents in to play with all of their new tools, to imagine uses of these that the product developers could never think of, because artists are always existing in this netherworld between the practical and the imaginary, the doing it just to see what happens and maybe make a statement versus making a product. So they're just doing things with you that pulls you into the new domain. And another thing that happened is, whenever a new technology comes out, frequently the first people to get a hold of it are not the artists. It's like when cinema came out and Edison invented the camera, movie camera, he locked it down on a proscenium to basically make it behave like it was going, to the theater. So you saw a locked down thing of either a train coming at you or a proscenium. Then D.W. Griffith gets a hold of it, invents all of these different shots. He actually figures out how to use cinema. This is like 20, 30 years later. So if you look at art and technology, some of the earliest computer graphic things, they were just mimicking drawing, but on the computer. By the time we get out to about the year 2000, when a lot of people are living on an AOL, it's just before the internet takes off, but a lot of people have computers. Um, the Wiki in New York and the Museum of Modern Art here each had shows. I think one was called 01 and the other was called 010101, about art and technology and privacy. It's the first time I went to a museum with technology. It's like, oh my God, this is about all the stuff we're dealing with, right? We had just, like right after 9/11, we're in a surveillance state. And what about, and then all the Ed Snowden stuff, and artists were just on top of this. Okay, so the medium grows up with the artist. Here's a great quote from Marshall McLuhan. Do you remember Marshall McLuhan? The medium is the message.
Yeah.
That art at its most significant is a distant early warning system that can be relied on to tell the old culture what is beginning to happen to it. So he always felt that, like, when we're trapped in one paradigm or like one era, the like literary era, and he was television, artists can help see what's next. And as we go through some examples today, I mean, that's why this stuff's exciting.
I'd love to. I want to get to these examples in a moment, but I have to ask: when you started, first off, when would you say you bought your first piece of digital art, approximately by year?
There's a priest. Here's an interesting pre-story to that. I grew up in New York, and my mom collected contemporary art. And a good friend of hers was a woman named Holly Solomon, who ran an avant-garde gallery. Holly famously made a lot of photographers well known in New York. And so she was like a cool person. She was over for Thanksgiving dinner one night. It must have been around maybe 1986. It was a while ago. I'd just gotten out of college. And I had written an article for the Washington Journalism Review on how computer games, which were like Ataris back then, how that was likely to become art, because in that 8-bit medium, people could express themselves and do things that we had never done before.
Yeah.
And it was representative of that generation. She looked at me over dinner and said, "Young man, you're an idiot. Those are simple. They are not artists. They'll never be in a gallery. It's silly stuff." And I'm thinking, but wait, you're an avant-garde lady. You're supposed to say this is the next big thing. So I think, like,
I was going to ask you if anyone had ever thought you were nuts for this stuff over the years. So I guess you kind of nailed it there. I mean, so even when you're kind of early conceptions, and I guess one of the things I think was always really interesting to me is, especially in the early days, if you take something that is, let's say, easily replicable, let's say, art that maybe is just a video or something like that, what's its inherent worth if it can be duplicated, which I think is one of the interesting things that pops up. How do you put a value on these things, which inevitably is going to lead us to a conversation around NFTs, I know, but I'd love to talk more about the early days where people weren't thinking about that kind of stuff.
That conversation began with the invention of photography and the printing press.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. So photography for years didn't count because it was too replicable and perhaps too easy. Right. And then the 20th century prints come out, and, they get value because, Warhol supervised the lithography and he destroyed the plates and then he signed it. Right. And even in computer art, and you're correct, because at its basis, it's a file. A trend has been, a lot of interesting work has been sold inside of beautiful either hand-built frames or even custom screens that are like square. They don't look like your regular TV, and they come with a cool installation. The NFT thing's beginning to bust that, right? We're trying to get to, put some economics behind this thing. But all these questions come up. Huge questions come up. Questions come up of how do you store it? Technology changes every 20 years. So if I have something that works in a computer circa 20 years ago, and will it even run today? Will it run 800 times faster? I have a screen behind me in this office, and I have running on it a work by my friend Golan Levin. I mean, a bunch of works, but Golan did this 20 years ago. And I was on the phone with him, and he saw it in the background. And he got all excited. He goes, I didn't even know that thing runs anymore.
You start keeping the dust off the fans. So what do we? I know you've prepared some. We're going to do something new for those of you who watch our ship. Every week we're going to do something new today. We're going to jump into some assets that Peter's brought along. Sometimes we bring on some mood imagery and mood video, but Peter's really pulled together some interesting kind of photography and shot some videos of different digital art, and I think it's going to help talk through some of the evolution of this. Robert, if you want to share, Peter,
I'd love to bring us into this whole conversation of where does technology and art start. So I call these are just a few examples here, which is, of course, it's a brief history of poo-pooing new art forms. And we could start in 1879 when Louis Daguerre popularizes photography. And here's one of his photographs, right? The public is delighted. And you'd figure that the French Academy, of course, would have to do its poo-poo thing. But what really got pissed off was the avant-garde. Here's Charles Baudelaire, who was the kind of bad boy of French literature, completely avant-garde guy. He sees this photography thing. He goes, wait a minute. If photography is allowed to supplement art in some of its functions, it will soon have supplemented or corrupted it altogether. And so basically he turns on photography. Let's move on to April 29th, 1874. Claude Monet launches Impressionism. So Impressionism takes off. We all love Impressionism, except what did everybody else think of this giant leap in art? This school does away with two things: lines, without which it is impossible to reproduce any form, animate or animate, and color, which gives the form the appearance of reality. Dirty 3/4 of the canvas with black and white, rub the rest with yellow, dot it with red and blue blobs at random, and you will have an impression of a spring which initiates the swoon into ecstasy. So he's basically like that new technology of art where you went outside with your paints. That's silly.
Yeah, if that's not poo-pooing, I don't know what poo-pooing looks like.
It's great. And as we'll see, the language of poo-pooing is consistent even when we get out to the future.
Yeah,
So
I think they had their own shit moment.
Ben Leposky invents computer art. These are the first images. They're actually called oscillons because it wasn't a computer at all. It was an analog computer. He basically rigged up an oscilloscope and voltages and then started getting these beautiful images, which to me looks like a dancer, right?
Yeah, beautiful.
The real first computer art show was something called the Cybernetic Serendipity in 1968 in London. And it featured a number of these works that started speculating with numbers and symbol design and what you could do in plotters. Eve Tingley made a robot where you could make your own. It was a machine that produced paintings, so you could make your own paintings. But when we get out to the reviews, people looking at all of this and saying, where does this fit in art? In the Sunday Telegraph, this exhibit serves to show up a desolation to be seen in art generally, that we haven't the faintest idea these days what art is for or about. All right, so there was a reaction. Meanwhile, you have people playing with all sorts of things. Here's Manfred Moore, who writes algorithms that start projecting multi-dimensional subjects or shapes back into 2 dimensions. So he mathematically creates shapes that are 8 or 10 dimensions, which are impossible to see, but then mathematically recollapses those dimensions back down to 2. So for years, maybe 40, 50 years now, he's been using math to explore things we can't make for real, or he was even beginning with kind of like characters and designs and what are the symbols that we create, right? So that's Manfred has been around. Some of this stuff just plays with sound. This is my friend Lynn Hirschman, and Lynn cares a lot about this. She did in the 70s. She was on to, hey, we get objectified in media. We get turned into nodes. We get kind of slammed with the brand who we are, put into a box, right? She's terribly prescient because this is kind of what social media has done to people. Lynn was a real pioneer in this field. And I interviewed her 10 years ago, and she's like, nobody understood it for years. You couldn't grant to it because it wasn't a category. Nobody knew how to write about it because it didn't fit anywhere. This piece is called Trash Mirror. So you'll notice it's kind of a mechanical television. As the guy moves here, if we just go back, you see as he moves, the stuff on that frame is moving, and the stuff is on stepper motors, and the pixels, if you will, are actually giant pieces of trash.
So
So
good.
and this is a whole series of works that are called reactive. So basically, there's some camera there, and the work reacts to the fact that you're there. And
A
this could be
lot of people were hijacking that Xbox camera for a while using the sword, if I remember
yes,
correctly.
yeah. The original I forget what it was called, but the Microsoft whatever the camera was,
Mm-hmm.
that sure, because that really opened up this field of responsive art,
Mm-hmm.
and people built all sorts of things with that, and that continues to this day. And part of what we do at Gray Area is we teach the stuff, and we have young groups do it with kind of existing more significant artists. This piece by Luc Dubois, in which he takes 50. These are 50. Well, we'll stop here. He takes 50 embraces from 50 famous motion pictures, and then kind of morphs them together and plots out how close everybody is. Right. So he's working with motion picture, but also that classic subject that artists work with, an embrace or a kiss. Say, friend Luke, this is a map of California. The words have been, or the cities have been replaced with the words that we use in our dating profiles in Match.com. So, and these are the words that more than any other, as a percentage, show up in those locations. So, gay, that is San Francisco. I think the word gay is used here in profiles, greater percentage than anywhere else. Evidently, in Berkeley, they stand out as young. Just north of San Francisco, in Southern Marin, true to form, spirituality. And in Santa Cruz, as you can see, they're liberal. In San Jose, which is not a place known for architecture, you may ask, why architecture? Well, they all write software architecture. So that's why you see software, architecture, intelligence, and engineer all clustering. and can you tell me why Sacramento is afternoon? Because I can't tell.
Yeah, I just thinking the same thing. No. That's hilarious.
So we're using data in art, right? We're actually extracting data and we're putting it in a spatial location, and out of that comes some meaning, both humor and understanding. Here's Manhattan, and this is great. So there you see up on the kind of midway in the thing to the right over it's basically 59th Street in the East River, Surgeon, because there's a lot of doctors there. Just above that is Passover, a Philharmonic Theater, because I guess they give a lot of money to Philharmonic. We've got Attorney. I mean, you can see what says privilege like this, right? Shrink, debutante, gentrification is what they stick in their profiles down in Wall Street. They're a little bit more interesting on the, they're an atheist incubator snide on the west side. You see a little bit of energy there. Okay, so I love the work. If you look in Brooklyn to the lower right, you will see Godfather, which is probably crazy. Okay, so that's some of the work clips, and then this piece here. This is a still, but this is another one of these memory pieces. There's a camera, and this one. Remember, it makes a collage of everybody who ever looked at the work, and so that's a lovely thing, right?
That's so cool.
It's collage, but it's also memory. So what happens if you go with your girlfriend, and a month later you go with your wife, and you and your girlfriend are played back on this? Okay, raises all those questions, right? That's kind of cool. And finally, we'll wrap up on this. This is the Bay Lights. This is our formerly boring Bay Bridge here in San Francisco, stepchild of the Golden Gate Bridge, which a bunch of Burning Man artists got a hold of about 10 years ago and said, why don't we turn it into a piece of LED art? And so they raised the money to do it. The real art was getting the highway authority to let them fuck with their bridge, because really it's like, okay, we'll stop. It goes on to NFTs. We'll talk about NFTs later, right? Yeah. This is like, now there's an NFT still. But here, we'll quit the slideshow and I'll come back. But the beautiful thing about the Bay Lights thing is that's public art It functions like a campfire. It's beautiful. It's like fireflies. It happens to use technology, and it's a way of taking our bridge and turning it into almost a meditation,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's. I'd say it's the whole Bay Area is better for it, frankly, because it's so beautiful.
And it started as an experiment, right? This is the other interesting thing. Leo, who did that, started by going to Burning Man, and he would get lost at night. So he started putting LED art in his camp just so he could get home. And then he got really good at it. Now he's an international artist, and he's applying technology. And here's the other thing: it doesn't, when you view it, you don't really think tech geeky art. It's just beautiful. The algorithms he uses, because you saw those patterns on the bridge that are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out certain patterns we like. They react to us. What are the patterns that emotionally get us going? Well, it turns out they're flocking patterns. They're the patterns of how birds flock, or waves move, or clouds move. Right? They're rhythmically. They're almost like the what is it? The golden rectangle in terms of responding to us. So Leo, when he programmed that, used a library of flocking patterns, which are used to generate games so that the birds can fly or whatever. And then he would sit there in a hotel and apply these and just see what was cool, right? So
there's these, I think, these patterns in nature that are primal and subconscious, and we can all access them whether we realize it or not. And I think there's something about that just maybe it helps you find balance without you even realizing it, which I think is really really cool. One of the things when I think about this and watching you explain all this, which I've always loved, and I love how passionate you are about it, and I always frankly find it deeply amusing that you're like, and then I talked to that guy last week, and I know this guy, and you so it wasn't just the art, but I feel like you got to learn about some of the backstories of these artists along that journey, because you had an opportunity to learn about them and understand their thinking, and I'm sure that had a pretty profound impact on you and your relationship with art in general. But when you think about kind of where it's going, where do you think what do you think people's relationship with art is going to be, I guess, moving forward? Are we crossing the precipice right now, or have we already crossed it, or are we still early days? When it comes to current generations with and digital art, is it the norm now, or is it just becoming the norm? I'd love to get your kind of take on where we're at.
If you were to go to an art fair or to a museum, the stuff's taken seriously now, and it used to be, that you'd go to an art fair and there's like 2 or 3 galleries that were the digital galleries. Now, almost every gallery is representing someone in that domain. One of the interesting questions is, how do we appreciate it, and at what scale, and how immersively? So, traditionally, if you go to an art gallery, it's a 2D thing. It's like it's a frame, right? And we know screens are 2D, so you could put a screen up and look at things. But when you author this stuff, you're creating in 3D, right? You're creating in complete VR, virtual reality, or augmented stuff. You could be complete surround Dolby sound. You could create. You could have humans with these things. So the available palette is kind of whatever you want. So one of the big trends is we're moving more towards immersive place-based performance. It's kind of the distinction between art you own and public art, right? So a number of things we've been doing at Gray Area, and that many of the artists who I pointed out here they're doing installations where you go somewhere, you pay $40, you go in for like an hour, and there's a very rich immersive thing that's kind of wondrous. Digital Van Gogh is playing in San Francisco and Vegas right now. They took a bunch of Van Gogh imagery, kind of put together a story arc of like his influences and how things move, and it's projected in this giant cavernous warehouse. On one level, it's simple. It's a bunch of projectors and they animated some stuff. On another level, when I first saw this in France, I saw whole families sit there for hours. It's amazing if mom and dad are as paying attention as the 2 kids, or the kids just walk around and dance it. So the fact that this is captivating people in all ages is significant.
I've heard the term play space, used quite a bit. I like what that evokes, right?
Yeah,
Because I think playing makes art accessible,
yeah.
I love the idea that more and more people get passionate about art, and if for youth, if the feeling that you're playing when you interact with it is what makes them fall in love or makes them take an interest, I think that's a beautiful thing, personally.
As a So if you look at economic as we come out of this pandemic, so here's another really interesting thing. Play space, which is immersive. We talk about an experience economy. People like to go for experiences. They with the demise of ground floor retail, because you can get it on Amazon, the places you go to have to provide an experience, whether it's they're showing you the jeans in an experience or the Apple experience, or it's an art experience. So that experiences are kind of going up. And as the pandemic ends, I think we're really going to yearn for doing things together that are meaningful and get us excited about humanity. We've just spent a year sitting looking at screens, right? We as McLuhan would say, we were auto amputated for a year, right? We were reduced to no legs and some eyes at a screen. People are going to yearn to get together, and we're seeing places like Area 15 in Las Vegas that puts on a bunch of these shows, Super Blue in Miami, our venue. Bookings are way up, so we're going to see a lot of that immersive. People are in surrounded by this stuff. And I can give you a couple of examples of that. That's a big trend. Um, the the collecting of this stuff obviously got a big boost because of the NFT thing. Um, and that kind of started partly because everybody was bored at home and they had some extra money. And so they started trading stocks, right? So you saw Robinhood, and suddenly trading becomes a game, and like everybody's just, and then it becomes a meme, and then the game is go get the short traders. And this is important because it's different. It's the DNA of different cultures mushing together, right? You have young people at home who like to game, and then there's this meme that like the bad people in the financial system are bad, so we're going to play this game, get the short guys, and then GameStop game goes up and down, and then the NFT thing comes in.
So I want to quickly interrupt Peter. Briefly explain for anyone out there who's watching right now or watching later who doesn't know what an NFT is. Can you give kind of like the top level explanation to make sure no one thinks we're talking coded language the whole episode?
So art created digital has been around for years. Um, it's been a little bit limited by things like how do you collect it, where would you display it, what's its value, stuff like that. So everybody's known there needed to be platforms where, among other things, you could. What are the business rules? Did you buy it? Did you rent it? How's the artist paid? An NFT is a non-fungible token. So if you think about Ethereum or Bitcoin, the units of value are tokens, which come in blocks. So you can buy a Bitcoin, and it's fungible in the sense that mine is the same as yours. It's like a dollar. It all has value. Um, there are only so many, but they're all the same. A non-fungible token is each one is a unique digital representation. There's no other ones like it. So therefore, I can make a unique work of art and give it a unique address. And so therefore, if I sell you the art, you're the only guy who has it. So there's a couple of advantages here. If the art comes along with a smart contract, which is the thing that would govern the use of this, then it means if I'm the artist and you buy it and you sell it for more, built into it, the artist can get some residual money, which has been an argument going on in the art world for years, right? So this actually allows artists to participate. Another thing it does is it can drag along provenance. Is it a forgery or the real thing? Well, it's sitting out there in a ledger. It's the real thing. So it and arguably it can open up accessibility because people can make stuff and put them on sites and sell it. And there's some hope that it's not like galleries that try to just sell the few famous people. And so that's basically what it is. It's a mechanism to assure the provenance and business rules around a digital asset, which is sometimes coded in it, and sometimes it's sitting out there as a separate file. It also mimics this current trend of people making content, right? Like, what's the site? Well, all these sites where like Substack, right, and Patreon, or even OnlyFans, right? People have been home this last year. They are monetizing their creativity and selling stuff on the internet. So NFTs also pick that thing up. The other interesting thing about NFTs is since they come out of blockchain culture, and the verb you use if you're getting coin, you're trading them, you're holding them, or you're trading them. And so a lot of my friends who get NFTs talk about trading NFTs. So part of what this does is it completely blurs this issue of, is it a currency? Is it value? Am I
Yeah, I
speculating?
find this really fascinating.
It's aesthetically good. And this has led to this kind of ridiculous thing that technically things that look like okay JPEGs are trading for hundreds of dollars or millions of dollars. Why is that
But
happening?
you can't help but go back, and part of me wants to, poo-poo it too, right? And I'm a diehard digital guy, but even I can be a cynic sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can't help me, but go back to the very first conversation that we were having at the beginning of this show, where you talked about, your kind of avant-garde art critic. I believe it was your mother saying, look, Atari, that this isn't art. This is not something serious. But frankly, even perfect example, early video game art and early video game artists, like those things sell for megabucks now. So it's hard not to take some of this that doesn't quote unquote look serious, being serious at some point, no matter how crazy it might sound to some of us today.
I think the construct of non-fungible, provenance verifiable, built-in smart contract, artists continue to get compensated. Like these constructs are exactly where it should go. I think it's more like it's just a little bit young and immature. For example, a lot of the NFTs that are being sold today are literally look practically like 8-bit things, or maybe they're images. The art that digital art collectors get tend to be very high resolution, and they tend to be longer. And a simple example is there's one artist named Rafique. I think we have some of his work here. One of his galleries was selling beautiful, like an edition of 6 30-minute beautiful videos in like a fancy frame for $30,000. So that's collected, limited value, museum quality. Rafique puts an NFT up, and he's getting hundreds of $1,000s a day for like few second clips. Well, that's a really weird value thing. You've got a beautiful half an hour furniture value thing, and I got a clip, but it's a lot more because it's sitting in an ecosystem where there's a lot of crypto wealth going around. So this is more like the marker of, it's a marker of a new market, because there's obviously a lot of potential difference. Like these two markets are behaving with completely different impedances and numbers of zeros. So that's going to get worked out. NFT, and so there's this a little bit of this bubble mentality that's going on, but also the dynamic range of what we see in them is going to grow. So like the first batch was like, they look like JPEGs, or even the Beeple, which was I think the $70 million one was, and I have it here, we can look at it. It's lots and lots of JPEGs, and then you can zoom down on them. So here, this is what the full Beeple looks like. So one of the interesting things is this is the $70 million Beeple that an investor bought, but the actual art. So what he bought is, it's mine. I am the owner of this essentially public work of art. But the rest of us here on planet Earth can download the exact same art and display it the same way. So except for the fact that I have the NFT, you and I have the same art here, because the NFT is a certificate. So if we put up that NFT again, can we zoom in on it?
I don't know if it's possible to zoom in, but you can't help but wonder. It's like, for some people, art is about entertainment or decoration or whatever, and they may be happy just to pay $200 for a beautiful G-clay version of that, or printed photograph version of that. But that for other people who really care about owning the original versions, well, then maybe it does have that inherent value. I guess it's like you said, it's like the same as having the original photograph and the 500,000th print of it.
One of the things that's going on here also is that NFTs prescribe, I think, much more of a relationship between the collector and the artist than is normally done. So, think back to Instagram. If you have Instagram followers and they like this and you're commenting on stuff, you actually know your Instagram followers. Now, if you up that and it's not just you like it, but I'm dropping it, and my fans are very excited, and there's a limited time period in which they can get it. That is a furthering of this social relationship culture. So what you find is many of the people doing NFTs have followings. People like supporting them, and they're of a belief that asset class will go up. So there's a thing going on between the audience and the artist that's more alive because there's a feedback channel and a lot of relationship. Then it went through a gallery. I bought it at the gallery. I took it home. I never met the artist, but I like his work. I think that's an advance.
Yeah, I want to jump back. Speaking of alive and also being sensitive to time, we started talking earlier about kind of place-based entertainment and even some of the Cinechamber concepts out there. I know you brought some other examples of where this digital art is going forward that I think is super exciting. I'd love to talk about some of those and share that with some of the audience.
Let's do
Did you have a specific one you want to jump to?
So we're gonna do two in this order. Okay. We're about to show. I think it's called Rhizomatics or 11 Play. It's the one that comes before Inferno. It's that looks like dance. Let me set this up. So at Gray Area, where we do this, I mentioned when we first started thinking about this 10, 15 years ago, we figured it was 2D stuff on the wall. So our first area was a white box gallery, white walls, frames in the wall, digital. And then one day it dawned on us, this stuff's 360. We should be in a theater. You're now going to look at a performance where you'll see dancers, and the woman, the choreographer, is dancers. Her husband, her partner, is an artificial intelligence guy, and they teamed up with a projection guy. So what you're seeing here is these dancers who are dancing. Their partner is a machine synthesized avatar. So the machine vision is watching them dance. As they dance, the computer is synthesizing their partner who will react to their movements. And then the partner itself is kind of synthesized out of images that it builds. So now that we have a synthetic partner for someone to dance with, we're creating this creativity between man and machine. And the machine reacts as the people change. Later in the performance, the machine leads and the dancers follow, right? So this raises this interesting question about who leads, who follows. And then towards the end, they all dance with drones, which are reactive to them.
It's so awesome.
And I think what's interesting here is this is a meditation on the possibility of greater creativity between man and machines. We think that machines deplete us or take over our jobs or can't be creative. In fact, with machine learning algorithms, you can have computers do very creative things. And here, humans are dancing with these wonderful machines, and then the machines get the humans to do things. So in a way, we're pushing both of us to be more creative.
Very, very interesting. And by the way, lots of great reactions in the chat. Everyone kind of loving these videos. Saying interesting chat. So Peter, thanks for sharing all this stuff with us. I'd love to pull up queue up the second one. Do you want to give a little context?
Okay, so this one, the one you just saw, from the audience's perspective, you sit in the audience and watch. Now let's put Inferno on. And Inferno, in this piece from Montreal, wearing augmented packs. So you're putting on these robotic arms, which are normally used so that people can lift heavier things, or soldiers have more power. Now we're putting these on the audience, but instead of this amplifying your movements, you are being danced. So there is...
Those are audience members?
Yes, the audience pays to be in this show. It's immersive. Awesome. So you buy a ticket, we put one of these on you, you're standing there, you're surrendering to the machine because it's dancing you, right?
That's amazing.
All of those pneumatic movements, the ups, the downs, the turnings, this is being programmed by the DJ.
That's
You're
amazing.
Submitting to it and being danced. And
so basically, even if you didn't know, like, you participate in the show, and they're going to make sure the choreography is perfect because the robot is dancing you.
Right. Now,
that's so good.
This was built as a dystopian vision. The guys who did it go, well, clearly a machine dominating a man who must submit. This is Dante's Inferno, right? There's it's clear story, but it didn't work out that way because when they put them on, people had more fun submitting to a robot and being danced than they'd had. I mean, people were in flow. They were happy. Like every word you can describe, like the state you want to be in, people were there. Some people said, well, normally I'm self-conscious when I dance. I don't have to worry about that.
Your dancing partner is going to straighten that out for you.
Another woman said to me, well, he was totally taking over my upper body, but boy, could I be free with my bottom body. I was like a dervish. So everybody found their bliss in this. Okay, but that's another piece that is, it's experimental. And in this case, it's people and robots. And it has this lovely story about control or not. Should we just look at a couple others as long as we're at it?
Yeah, let's
do you want to show? Let's show Rafique's. This is the ISS one.
Yeah, no problem. That's on my screen. I just pulled it up now.
Yeah, so this is this. Okay, so technically, what we're looking at is it moving? I think you.
Yeah, it should be moving.
So, okay, effectively, what you're looking at when it's smooth is a beautiful, high-resolution, undulating. Looks like undulating pastels and stuff. It's actually thousands of images of the Earth from the International Space Station, and so
wow.
It's projected in a giant room, and the experience is it's a little bit like being in underwater or in perhaps in a cave with the lights flashing or whatever, but you're immersed in this very Earth perspective. And Rafique sometimes immerses you in data. He did a piece in New York where he immersed you in all sorts of stories and statistics about New York, so you're almost being immersed in the history of that. And he does Rafique is particularly internationally well known at this stuff, and people paying kind of immerse in these performances. We can kill that one because it's not moving that well. And then I think there's one other. I think we have the Cerncia from Raphael Lozano-Hemmer.
I don't remember if we queued that one up or not. I guess we'll find out in a second.
Yeah.
But I do want to say.
Go ahead.
While we pull that up, I do want to say just a special thanks to all the people. Go ahead and pull that up.
Yeah, so this is a piece by Raphael Lozano-Hemmer, which he's done a whole bunch of really interesting things. What we're coming up on here is this immersive one that he's had going on, and this starts to look at symbols and how people communicate with each other, how we go from symbols to computing. This was immersive. I think it got interrupted because of COVID, but Raphael is going to be doing a big retrospective here in San Francisco at the Museum of Modern Art later in the year, and he's going to be in residence at Gray Area doing work with us. He had a particularly transgressive piece just before COVID. You went into a room, it sealed it off, and he wanted to create intimacy. The air recirculated, so you had to breathe the air that everybody else in that room was breathing. You can imagine that when and he had done another one where he took the sound of hearts, but he's basically trying to let's sonify breath and feel all of it. So that was timely. He also did a really interesting piece on the Mexican border.
He's like, I call this one super spreader event.
Exactly. Right. We're trying to decide whether we should do that in San Francisco. But there's a whole new domain of where this art is going that has to do with artificial life, like actually creating synthetic biology, synthetic life, merging of cells for artistic effect. And we're going to do a whole festival on that in 2022 because, if it was pixels and then AI and then we're dealing with architecture and we're moving fashion. Life is next. Raphael. The other interesting thing about Raphael is he has an interesting piece and he did on the border. So here's these two towns that are, I guess, the last town in California, the first one in Mexico, just crossed by a river, a lot of people know each other, but they're not allowed to go over because of all the border stuff. So he did this thing where there was a dialogue with floodlights and like telephones, and so it created this intimate connection where you couldn't be connected. He's from Mexico City, so when he comes to San Francisco, we're looking forward to him working with our local Hispanic community in the Mission, because Gray Area is in the Mission, which is a largely Hispanic community. We're doing all this interesting art and tech stuff. There's always a little suspicion that maybe we're techies and they're mission people, and does that fit in our stew of San Francisco? So having this artist coming from Mexico working with our community and exposing ideas is going to be a lot of fun.
Really cool. Really cool. So, Peter, it reminds me of when you and I have dinner. I feel like we could talk all night. I do have to be conscious of time today, though. I just want to say a massive thanks. I enjoyed this so much. We're going to have you back on the show at some time. And, maybe we can do something on quarantine sometime as well. I didn't know you were over 60 episodes now. That's really great. So if you enjoyed today's chat, check Peter out. You can follow him on LinkedIn. You can learn more at the Gray Area Art Foundation.
You can if you go to it's grayarea.org.
Grayarea.org.
And if you go to grayarea.org, you will find we offer a lot of classes. So a lot of these techniques you can sign up online and learn.
That's wonderful.
We have cohorts of where people are going through, teams who create these works, and then we sell tickets to them so you can make money that way. And there's also really interesting presentations and lively stuff going.
Perfect. That's great. So people really want to immerse themselves in something very actionable that you can go do. And look, if you enjoy Ship, this is something we do for fun. It's not something we're trying to monetize. The best thing you can do to support us is give us a like, give us a share, share it on any of your social feeds, wherever you're subscribed, depending on what platform you're on. We're simultaneously streaming across LinkedIn, YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitter, and on Facebook. So wherever you got it, please check it out and support us in any way you can. Peter, I just want to say thank you again. It was so great to catch up with you. I cannot wait to do it in person again soon. But I'll take an hour with you on video anytime.
This is great, and this has been a lot of fun. And thanks for calling up. This is we really fun to get into this stuff and share it.
Yeah, good catch. So good. And nothing else, I know I'll see you at Art Basel this year in Miami. So thanks everyone for watching this week, and see you next week on Ship.